And welcome back to the show. It's me, Hugh. Miranda is here today on a Wednesday, and we are very happy to have Dr. Norman-Allan joining us in the studio. And Norman, it's been a couple of years. You said decades, but
it feels like decades.
It's
well, time is
been
passing
a long
slowly,
time.
then.
it has been well, you know, it's been a long, strange trip.
Right. The studio looks, well, shall I say beautiful?
Yeah, you could say
corners
that.
of it.
Do we have that other camera with
We
the
step
great
in
shot
a
of the
bit.
room? See, look.
There we go.
Look, there's the
Brilliant.
big room shot.
This-
I love
right.
that shot.
It was, you have expanded.
Yeah, we
And
did
this
expand.
feels really comfortable.
Yeah, great.
Yes.
Well, we're really glad to have you back,
Yeah.
and I know you're doing a lot of. Well, first of all, you're a chiropractor, right? I got your card
I'm a
here.
chiropractor.
Yeah.
I'm the doctor I'd see.
Do you still practice?
I still practice. Visit my website and come and see me.
Interesting.
And I know you brought this book, a novella that you wrote here
Right.
about your dad, right?
Yes.
Your
This
dad
is a story of Ted-Allan in Spain, and I thought the best way to tell this story is as though it's a movie. So this told as though it was a movie. It's Ted-Allan in Spain, the movie. 4 of the 5 important foreigners in Spain, not including George Orwell, who was in Barcelona, but Norman Bethune and Ernest Hemingway and Robert Capa, the great war photographer, and Gerda Taro, who gave him his name and who died in Spain. The crux of the nub of their experience of Spain was their interaction with my father, and that's told in Ted-Allan in Spain, the movie. The illustrations are posted online, and on Amazon you can get the text.
You know,
And
Brilliant.
I recommend it.
You know, maybe this interview is going to take this direction here
This is brilliant.
because as you mentioned, I mean, your dad, he's kind of famous, right? Because
Well, in his time, he had a little bit of fame.
Had
he
his
wrote
day.
that. What was that big book? They made a movie of it, set in Montreal, I guess.
Lies my little book. Lies
Yeah.
my fire. It was a short story
Yeah.
that he turned into a television film and then into a film called Lies My Father Told Me. And then he had a book deal,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't quite know how to write the book, and he didn't want to write the book. So he asked me if I thought I could write the book. So I did the novelization. I wrote the book of the
Oh,
film.
really?
Wow.
It's called Lies My Father Told Me, and it's posted on my website. It's hard to find copies because it's been out of print for 40 years, but 50 years.
But it's a piece of Canadian cultural
It's
history, right?
It was taught in schools. And I know this because when I came back to Canada, intending to get into research and clinical work, and things misfired a little bit for 2 years, and I drove cab for 2 years in 1980-81. And twice, on 2 occasions only, I mentioned that I had done this novelization, written this book. And on both occasions, it was people who had read it at school, and one of them, it was the thing that started them reading.
Brilliant.
So, just
It's a part of Canadian history as
well,
far as...
and that story is about somehow knowing when to say things that not necessarily appropriate, but are appropriate.
Well, what do you mean? That's
Well,
what the...
well, I did. I only on 2 occasions mentioned.
Oh.
I didn't tell every fair. Oh, I wrote a book once.
Yeah.
Just on 2 occasions I mentioned it, and it was people who had read the book.
Yeah, that's fantastic, actually.
Yeah. And I've had similar things happen. That's an interesting story. But
Well,
where are we going?
Exactly.
Let's talk about. Yeah, I'm interested in
Ted in
this
Spain.
because this is you're saying that this is a historical document, that your dad was among the famous foreigners in Spain, and this would have been in the.
He was among them. He wasn't one of them.
Right.
But their interactions with him was in some cases the climax and the nub of their experience of Spain.
So, and this would have been in the 30s?
It's 1937.
37,
Wow.
okay. So this is when the...
It was besieged, when Madrid was besieged by the fascists, surrounded on 3 sides by the fascists.
and this is a part of history that I think kind of remains a little forgotten.
It's untouched. Right now, my lineage is, we have absolutely no sense of those types of, concepts.
So
And
what were
it
they
would
all
be
doing in
interesting.
Spain? And of course,
They
Norman...
were resisting fascism. This was Hitler and Mussolini testing their might. This was a rebellion by fascist army against the government in Spain.
So let's go through the history, because I'm not even clear about it. So there was a normal elected government, and then the army came in and took over?
It would flip-flop between the right wing and the left wing, and in the mid-30s, the left wing got back into power, and the right wing went into revolt. And the colonial armies from Spain, from Morocco, the Spanish held Morocco then, they came over with Franco and invaded the mainland, and they were allied with the rich and the church against the workers. So we all know of, what we know is Guernica. Guernica is a city in the Basque Country in northern Spain that the Germans bombed and obliterated.
Which inspired
the painting.
Was it
Picasso's painting? Yeah. Which was in the UN. A copy of it's in the UN.
Wow.
And when Colin Powell went to present the evidence of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, they covered Guernica. They covered Guernica as they got ready to go to war in Iraq. So there was the large sections of the army invaded to throw out the government and to put in a junta, which they did after 3 years of war. Franco ruled for about 30 years, but he sent troops to the Eastern Front.
Who, the Spanish? In the Second World War.
In the Second World War, they sent troops to help the invasion of Russia, help Hitler, working with Hitler. But they didn't get involved with the war on France and the war on England.
And that's kind of curious.
Well, he wanted to stay neutral. He didn't know who was going to win, and he thought
he needed to keep some friends around.
He needed to keep some friends around in case the Germans lost, and the Germans lost, so it was a good thing he had stayed.
And the Germans wouldn't have invaded them anyway.
Well, no, the Germans propped them up. The Germans, there were about 100,000 German troops, and the German Air Force was bombing Spain. And there were 120,000 Italian troops. Mussolini's troops were there.
So what was going on in those days, Norman? You had in Germany, for example, you really did have a huge rivalry between the communists.
Not at that time. At that time, you had a small underground resistance, very barely. At that time, you had getting ready to open the death camps, getting ready to invade Europe, getting ready to make the.
So Hitler had already kind of taken over Germany.
Hitler was moving into Sudetenland.
So the war was almost already begun.
During the Spanish Civil War, Hitler went into Czechoslovakia. During that time.
So your dad went over to fight.
So he went over to fight to resist the fascists.
And what was
stop fascism?
What was going through his mind? What was the source of his conviction?
He was a communist. He believed, and communists were idealists. Not that well informed about what was going on in the Soviet Union, but who was? Hitler, Mussolini, Franco had to be resisted. Fascism had to be stopped. He was a young man when the Spanish Civil War broke out. He was 20 years old. He was working as a journalist for the communist newspaper in Canada called the Daily Clarion. Wow. And he thought he was going over as a reporter for the Clarion. He was a colleague and protege. Bethune was a mentor of his. They were colleagues in the movement. And he thought he was going to join Bethune in Spain and work with him and work for the Clarion. But Fred Rose, who was the chairman of the party, forgot to tell the editor. So Ted had his ticket in his pocket and his passport, and went to get his credentials, came down to Toronto to get his credentials, and said, well, Leslie Morris said, if you'd come yesterday, I would have given you credentials, but somebody came in and we gave them credentials. So Ted decided he had to go to Spain, and he'd had to go anyway, and he enlisted in the brigade. And the 26 other North Americans he went over with were dead within 6 weeks.
No, what happened? They enrolled in a military
They enrolled in the
operation?
International Brigade, volunteers foreign volunteers who were resisting and who helped save Madrid.
So this would have been a communist international...
Left-wing international.
Left-wing.
A large communist influence, but
Right.
it was not affiliated. The International Brigade was not directly affiliated with the party. And somewhere I read, maybe heard from Ted, that from North America, half the volunteers in the International Brigade were Jewish. Which is...
From North America.
Interesting.
Maybe all of them.
Now,
but
what
particularly-
is the meaning of that?
Well, the fascists were making a war on. Let's not get into that.
Next subject.
Call me back.
We don't
Okay,
want
let's talk about Jewry on another.
So
it's a long subject.
Your father was the
Okay.
only one that was left as far as
My
who
father
he went over
mentioned
with.
during the induction into the International Brigade, they were asked what they were doing, and he mentioned he was a journalist in Canada, in Montreal. And they said, well, then we'll find some other work for you.
Oh, they didn't put him on the front lines
And
or
they
any...
didn't put him on the front line.
So what was his day-to-day work that he was doing?
He was, as it transpired, as it then evolved, he was sent to Madrid to report to one of the heads of the brigade, and he was under Comrade Gallo's command, and he was to work with Bethune and to report to the brigade on Bethune, because there were rumors about the brigade wanted to know what was going on. There was strife in the unit.
So they were spying on each other?
So almost a communication
Kind of thing?
concept of...
Communication, a liaison, report for
Liaison.
us. He had credentials from the Federated Press, who were the union's wire service.
Yeah.
So a minor service. So it was to work as a journalist, to work as a volunteer with Bethune. And when he arrived and told Bethune, told that he'd have to tell Bethune what he was doing. When he told Bethune that the brigade wanted him to report, Bethune said, well, someone should find out what's going on in the unit. I'll make you, you're going to be the political officer for the unit. So my father was Bethune's commissar, but that was in Bethune's mind.
Wow.
But my father reported to Gallo,
Wow.
and he didn't wear a uniform, the brigade uniform. He functioned as a journalist and broadcast to North America from Madrid.
Now let's talk about just the difference between those times and these times, because when you think about it,
What do I know?
no, when you think about
I
it,
know about those times from my father's writings, from history. I don't know them direct. I was not born.
right? But people were so political, and they lived their ideals.
The passion behind Donald Trump is,
Into
forgive me, so similar to the passion behind Adolf Hitler.
You think?
Same passion. And Hitler got elected with 22% of the vote. And then Bismarck made him chancellor.
Yeah. Now let's talk about why that is happening, because I mean, I am concerned. I don't want there to be another Hitler to come to power, but I'm concerned that
Some of us think that maybe Donald doesn't have the smarts to be.
Well, I think he was shocked that he actually has gotten this far.
Yes.
That's my take.
Well, I'm just. I think part of the issue is that there's a sense of dissatisfaction or powerlessness
Yeah.
among people, and
Oh,
so
yes.
at some
Yeah.
point, I mean, the German population is a good example. I mean, they were under a lot of pressure. The economy had collapsed, and they were looking for answers, any answer, almost,
Getting
right?
Right.
And then under those circumstances, you can have that kind of thing happen.
And then you had the extremism. You had an intense rivalry between the far left and the far right.
Yeah.
And
who's got the better answer, right? So, but
who's got the more stormtroopers?
But where does that leave us today? Like, I mean,
we'll see.
I mean, I think you could have somebody worse than Donald Trump up there. You know what I mean?
Rick Salutin wrote 2 weeks back. I wonder if it's on. Excuse the plug for the Star. Wrote on Rob Ford lying in state, and he felt that there was a difference between Rob Ford and Trump. So Trump is Rob Ford without the warmth, he said.
Interesting analogy.
So we should.
So this book. So my father also said that Hemingway was extremely jealous, and there was an intense rivalry. It's a fascinating story. Robert Capa and Gerda Taro are such heroic figures. Read the book. Look at the illustrations online.
Brilliant.
Visit the website. Visit the website, and on the website there's poetry, there's prose,
The Heartless World,
and there's a graphic story. Not yet the graphic novel. This is going to become a graphic novel, and that's that we could talk about. But there's a graphic story, which is called "Counting My Days." A beautiful, wonderful young woman came and sat at the Arts and Letters Club where I paint on a Sunday morning, and that's the story. Like the 2 people I spoke to when driving a taxi, do I tell that story? I was manning a booth outside across from my office in a health food shop, and manning a booth, asked the doctor, and someone a young man hurrying by, suave gentleman, and he stopped and came over and talked to me. He was rushing to see his sister-in-law, who was critically ill, and we talked a while, and I think I recommended he take Rescue Remedy. And then I thought, as with the 2 people, I mentioned the book to her, but I also draw, I also paint, and I took up my book.
Man of many talents.
And I said, I showed, it's mirror imaged.
Yeah.
Wow.
I showed this picture. So these things that come to you, because it's not the thing to do. You don't talk when you're talking about as a doctor. You don't
normally.
And when you're driving the car, so knowing there's sometimes knowing things.
Yeah, it's
these
just
things that
empathy.
really can't be explained as coincidence, but involve there's something going on. That hint that tell us there's something going on. But that's another story. So I'm plugging for you to have me back.
So we need to have you back.
For us.
We would
There's
love
a lot
to have
for us
you
to
back.
We
talk
need
about.
to do it because you've got. I mean, we don't want
It's
to talk about
beautiful.
too
I wanna
many
read the
things
rest of this.
in one interview,
Right.
right?
Right. But
what
let's
happened?
talk on the website.
Yeah.
You could go. We got.
Norman-Allan.
So you've
Go
got-
on, open up.
It's so beautiful.
Here's the website.
Yeah.
And if you go right down to the bottom, you'll find there's a list of the books, and in the middle is
It's right there.
this graphic story of Boot Up.
So when they go to the
This-
website,
Yeah.
Now,
Oh, you won't be able to see it.
Well-
But you see
you've got an
Darcy,
illustration.
who came to us 2 months before she got her diagnosis, and she came and she sat for us during 3 days after her mastectomy and during her chemo, and for 5 years on tamoxifen, and then last summer she had some abdominal pains, and she went for ultrasound, and she found she was in her 2nd trimester. And she came and sat for us during her pregnancy and during the 3rd trimester. And
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
take a look at Counting My Days.
So the art is there, and the book. Now,
And the
do you
book.
think this should be a movie as well as a?
It would make a wonderful movie, but I don't make movies yet.
Yet.
Yeah.
See, the word was yet.
But I suppose the rights to this are available.
Oh yes.
If the filmmakers out there are interested, a great
yes.
piece of Canadian cultural
Yes.
They can
history.
hunt.
But this book, I think this is a wonderful story. This is the most interesting and exciting story that I know, and I think I've done it proud.
Okay.
Brilliant.
All right, Norman Allan,
was
great to
wonderful.
have you back in the studio, and we will have you back, and we will talk about some of the other work you're doing with homeopathy, with chiropractic, and you've got the practice, of course, on the Danforth. And are there links to that from the website?
Yes.
So people can get you there for all the stuff, and it's like it's just good to see. You know, I think we've gotten used to in our culture to people who do one thing and one thing only, but I think that as complete human beings, we have a wide variety of interests, and I think in this life, if we can explore all of our talents, then we're doing something.
And
right.
sometimes it's so onerous. I have a friend who's a pathologist, and it's such stress, and and they work her such long hours.
Yeah.
If she could be spending 2 days a week sweeping the streets or collecting garbage,
Yeah.
and 3 days a week being a pathologist, life would be so much better for her.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks, Norman.
Thank you very much.
We'll see you again
We'll see you
soon.
again.
So we're going to take a little break. Of course, that website, norman-allan.com. We're going to take a little break, come back with our next guest, Thunder, as Liquid Lunch continues.
Thank you.